Good evening and welcome to today's session on BIC streams, presented by the Art of Gold in collaboration with the Yarn Club. This is the third lecture, which is part of the Art of Gold lecture series. Today's lecture is My Journey with Gold, a Private Memory. And joining us today is author, publisher, and advisor on cultural initiatives, Malvika Singh, who is also making her Zoom debut today. Worry not that she's not been on Zoom all this while. She's been busy writing books, and we are very grateful that she has joined us today and to do for this lecture. Malvika will be in conversation with Sharan Apparao. We will be posting the bios of today's speaker on the chat box, and do post your questions in the Q&A box. With that, welcome everyone, and over to you, Swati.
Hello, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you all here today for the Art of Gold series of lectures. I would like to thank Raghu and the BIC, Sharan and Rupa of the Yarn Club for their continued association with us. I would like to welcome our speaker for the evening, Mrs. Malvika Singh. Mala, as she is fondly known to all of us, needs no introduction. In the fields of art, craft, culture, theatre, films, journalism, design, her list of achievements is endless. A person who wears many hats, she's a mine of information, and speaking with her reveals insights from her experiences, leaving everyone more enriched. We were first introduced to Mala when we held the Art of Gold show at the Bikaner House in 2017. We have continued to be guided by her over the years. A unique aspect of Mala's person is how she keeps the idea of the oral tradition as a riveting storyteller alive. As part of the Art of Gold series, we wanted to connect with this aspect of Indian narrative. Today, Mala will be talking about her journey with gold. It's a deeply personal journey of what has moved and inspired Mala about gold and human civilization over the years. Thank you, Mala, for accepting our invitation for this talk. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Good evening. I must say I was a little nervous about talking to a screen. I'm usually best when there are lots of people around and you feel the energy and you see expressions in the audience and you know where to correct yourself. However, here I am, and I'm going to tell you a personal history. Right through COVID, I found myself delving into past stories about my life, travels, meeting people, experiencing all kinds of things. And as Swati pointed out, or Raghu, I can't remember. Yes, I have done a lot of things in my life out of interest, not as a scholar. And so I call myself a professional dilettante. And to begin, therefore, let me start with, can we have an image? The first image. Now, here's a piece of gold tissue. It's a sari. And there is something very ethereal about a tissue sari. I'll talk about that a bit later. But I'd like to start by saying my first introduction in a manner to gold was when, and I don't recall it, was when I was 2 years old and a gold wire pierced my ear and I started wearing earrings after that. So that was the first experience. Next. The second was when I got my first sari. It was a Chanderi sari given to me by a woman called Leela Mulgaonkar, whose husband had set up telco for the Tatas. It was in the 50s. I was all of 8 years old. And I was given this sari. It was white. It had red and gold booties. And it had a gold border. And I remember looking at it and saying how beautiful this gold border and the gold palla with just gold bands on it. It was absolutely lovely. Next. And then I was at a wedding in Bombay many, many years later. And my mother said to me, I've got a very old tissue, gold tissue. Why don't you wear it at this wedding in Bombay? It's very warm in Bombay and this will be light and it's not a heavy silk. So I hesitated, but finally wore it. It's not a very good picture, but it was so beautiful. It was made of aslizar gold, and it just wrapped and flowed beautifully around the body. That evening, I went out to the discotheque after the wedding at the Oberoi. I think it was called the Cellar, if I'm not mistaken. And when I got out of the hotel at about 2 a.m., there were nothing but shreds left of that sari. And I sort of hitched it all together, went back home. And when I came to Delhi, I decided to sell it for the weight of gold. Next. In those days, there used to be this call that I used to hear in Bombay, and most recently, yesterday in Delhi, surprisingly, of the Jari Puran Wala, who would shout loudly as he walked down the alleyways, looking for old fabric. If it was Jari, he weighed it and he gave you the price of the gold on that day's rate, and you just had to trust him whether it was, what carat gold it was. And if it were just normal rags or saris that are torn and frayed, he gave you utensils for it. Next. And with the frayed cloth, you got a lot of these gudaris that were made, which was soft, and they were just like covers. Now we call them dohars, and they're very sophisticated, and you find them at all the fancy stores. But gudaris were made by us, and the leftover that had really frayed badly, we'd exchange for utensils. Next. It was a very strange time. When I was growing up as a young girl, we didn't want to wear gold. It looked too opulent. I'm talking now of the 60s. We like to wear the handloom fabrics, and particularly from the south and from Orissa, the ikats and South Indian kanjivarams from Chettinad and Kanjivaram in cotton with no zari. These opulent saris were not for us. Next. So when I got married, I rejected all these. When my mother-in-law said to me, I'm going to buy you some nice sort of very zari saris, I said, no, not at all. I don't wear such saris. Next. Then recently, Banaras came back into my life, but I'll talk about that later. Next. These were the cotton saris we wore. And we wore them with a lot of silver jewelry and, embellished it, never wore gold jewelry. This was the way we were. We were young college students. Indira Gandhi was the prime minister. She used to wear saris like this. And she encouraged a lot of us by just dressing in cotton handlooms. She set a trend. And she was like the fashion icon. She led the market. And with her, there were people like Pupul Jayakar and Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and the whole cottage industry's beginnings. And that led to the Martan Singhs and the Rakesh Thakors. And we did a lot of work in cotton, and we all wore cotton, and we wore silver jewelry. Next. Very influenced by Rajasthan and the silver from there. The chintz prints, that the ghagras were made of, the bandhani of the dupattas. Next. And the mirror work and the embroidery. Next. And that's the chint. And now, of course, the chint is these big, bold prints. In my time, they were very small, very tiny little flowers, beautiful, beautiful chints. Today, you don't get them. You only get them in man-made fiber and not in handloom. Next. So these were the silver jewelries we collected. Next. Let's just go through some of those pictures. And I tried to build a collection. So there were handloom saris and silver jewelry. The only saris with zari that I wore in those days were the Kerala saris, like these in the picture, or Venkatgiris. The Venkatgiris were beautiful in my time. They were all in geometrics. There were none of these huge floral patterns and animal motifs and all that. They were very simple, very plain. And that's what we wore when we went to a wedding or to an event. And this is where I began to understand the intervention of the Ganga Jamna, the silver and gold. So I would go out wearing a sari like this, which had a gold border, and wear it with silver jewelry. Then I discovered slowly that you had saris that had a silver border above and a gold border below, and they were called Ganga Jamna, syncretic culture. They were symbols of a syncretic culture. And I don't want to get into all that because, that's an endless conversation. But there was this Ganga Jamna. And here I'd like to also mention that in royalty, only the royals were allowed to wear gold pajabs by, whatever, Riti Rivaj. Commoners wore silver. Again, silver, gold. I decided when I was a young woman that, what? Let's level up with everybody. We're a free country. So I went and bought my first pair of gold pajabs and started to wear them. And I remember every time I went and there were some royals around, I would sort of shake my leg a bit and lift the sari, show my ankles, and they'd look down at my feet and look at the gold anklets and wonder, oh my God, why is she wearing those? Those days are now over. Next. Jaisalmer. In the early 70s, I, with my husband, we made a film on Jaisalmer. And for me, it was an amazing experience because when we drove down that road, which is now very busy on both sides of the road, there was nothing. There was just desert, gold sand. And as you drove, it was like a mirage emerging from the desert. You had this golden city come up. And when we got there, it was about sunset. And this entire fortress city was just glistening. And it made a huge impact on me. Sandstone, gold, just the patina of burnished gold and that sandstone of this amazing city in the middle of the Thar desert. Next. These are some images of the temples there. Next. And that's the fort, and it looks gold. I mean, it looks like burnished gold. Next. And then the Golden Temple. I married into a Sikh family, and I went to the Golden Temple. I was amazed at that temple. It just looked so beautiful. And of course, the Sardarji wearing his yellow turban. I mean, it just was perfect. And these are the images that started to permeate. Coming from I was born in Bombay, so I came from a rather cosmopolitan, rather contemporary kind of people background. And my parents were lefties. So gold never really figured. Jewelry never figured. Heavy saris never figured. It was all to do with craftsmen and rural economies and what we could buy from there and rejuvenate that post-independence. So these were the beginnings where gold started just entering my psyche. Next. And then the festivals of India happened. Now, I'm jumping because I thought I would like to do this conversation or talk or call it what you may by actually picking these landmark moments in my life where gold kept intervening. So that's what I'm sharing with you. So forgive the jumps, but that's the only way I could do this in the kind of time span we have. Festival of India. It's a very interesting story. Martan Singh, Mapu, as we all know him, rang me one day and said, there's 2 Naga boys who've arrived with some sacks full of wonderful things. I don't know what they are. What should we do? I think we should go to Popul Jaikar and ask her whether she would commission us to go to Nagaland. First photograph these objects. First buy the objects, photograph them, go to Nagaland, identify which tribe each object belonged to, and do an exhibition for the Festival of India. That took us to Moscow because we opened our exhibition of Naga art in Moscow on the ground floor of a huge exhibition area. It was opened by Gorbachev and Raisa, his wife. On the first floor, Rakesh Thakur did his first collection of beautiful, beautiful saris in all kinds of colors, beautiful. And on the third floor, David Abraham did his first fashion show. It was a great moment for all of us. We were all experimentalists. We learned on the ground, on the job, and we had the backing in those days of people like Popul Jaikar, Kamla Devi ji, who actually threw people like us into the deep end and said, go learn for yourself. You don't need the credentials of having gone to fashion institute or to a school of textiles or whatever. Just go learn. It was early days, and so we threw ourselves into it. And we went to, this is Zagorsk. These are the domes. I was just amazed. I mean, look at that blue. Look at the gold work on it, the gold dome. These are Orthodox churches. Next. Look at that. Now, when you go to Russia and Gorbachev is the president and you got communist power, you don't expect to see the opulence of gold or the opulence of anything that is finely done with things that are precious. You think of the left and the communists as being people who would sort of, shun all this. But Moscow is one of the most beautiful cities. And right through that period, they never destroyed it. They never destroyed the Kremlin or the Hermitage or any of that. They revered it all. They revered their ancestry. Next. That trip, we went to Leningrad. It was called Leningrad in those days. And there's the Hermitage. And Mapu had said to me that he had once, on an earlier recce trip, been to Leningrad and asked to see the gold collection, which was in a sort of strong room that was attached to the Hermitage. And they'd pull out things, display them, put them back. It was really the vault. A vault that was a huge room. It was a hall. So when I went in there, I asked the director of the Hermitage, I said, I'd like to really visit the gold vaults. And he said, absolutely not, madam, not allowed. And Mabu said to me, Mala, you just behave like you behave when you're in India and somebody says no, and you throw a tantrum and it happens. So I sat in the hotel and I said, well, sir, I'm not moving from here till you open that vault. I don't care if it takes 2 months. And I thought, oh God, where's this going to lead? 4 o'clock that evening, he came back and said, come with me, madam, we've opened the vaults. Come and have a look. And I can't tell you, I don't think I've ever had an experience like that ever in my life. We walked in through these bars and it was from floor to ceiling. There was just gold, burnished, 24 karat gold jewelry, artifacts, furniture, and the works. Within 10 minutes, I had to sit on one rather fragile chair, which was all gold worked. The legs were pretty much like the chairs in the Bolshoi, in the main Bolshoi hall. Again, beautifully worked. And in fact, just as an aside, those chairs which are worked with gold paint are attached to the ground with chains so that nobody walks off with them. So I sat down, looked at this. There were necklaces that were just, gold is a malleable metal. They just wound round like this with a head of a serpent, bangles that went halfway up the arm. I mean, just stunning, very raw, very real, very ancient civilization. With some pieces, you couldn't tell whether it was from India, whether it was from Mesopotamia, whether it was from Egypt. So now I'm going to let you have a look at some of those pieces we've selected. Next. So that's inside the Hermitage, one of the halls, with a throne at the other end. Please note the beautiful vaulted ceilings and the pillars, and it's all beautifully done. Next. There again, a close-up. Next. Now look at that work on lacquer, gold and lacquer, and how beautifully preserved. This is the Soviet Union. Beautifully preserved. I mean, they really respect everything they own. Next. Has another piece. Next. And this is the Bactrian jewelry. The Bactrian stuff came out of a mound in Afghanistan. It is absolutely, look at it, with the turquoise and the heads of animals. Next. I get very carried away when I see this jewelry, forgive me. Now, this in gold is quite similar to the silver that is worn, let's say, in Rajasthan by the rural folk in Rajasthan. So there was a design aesthetic, a sensibility across these cultures, some in gold, because that was rulership and that was, power and prestige. And then the ruler folk wore it all in silver. Next. The snake image in all ancient societies. Out of sheer fear, we worship the snake. Next. The ram. Next. A bowl. It's absolutely beautifully crafted, handcrafted. Here I want to emphasize hand skills. These are all hand skills, the power of the hand. And I think that we need to spend a lot of time trying to work with artisans and support them to do things that are of a very high quality, patronage craft, and not just run-of-the-mill stuff that's done, in a dye and so on. So, but I don't want to get into all that here. This next. Here another piece of sculpture in gold. Next. A bracelet. A throne. A bench. How beautifully crafted is that bench? Next. Now, then we were in Moscow, and as you all must know, the metro is beautiful. It has the most stunning chandeliers in it. Then we went to a place called Zagorsk, which is the center of the Orthodox Church, and we saw a lot of beauty there. Every wall was surface painted with icons. It had gold work all over it. This is a modern church. We couldn't get all the pictures of the Zagorsk churches and so on, but here is one interior of an Orthodox church. Next. Here's another interior of an Orthodox church. Next. Here's another one. It's very ornate, very, very ornate. This is from Russia. Next. Again, an interior from Russia. I should say Soviet Union, it's Russia now. A ceremony happening. Look at the clothes. I mean, everything is embellished with gold. This is when I realized that the embellishment was in gold, and it contrasted with every color in the color palette. It just gave it that little push up, and it emphasized pattern. It outlined pattern. I began to look at it slightly differently. And I will talk later how cultures are just united in all this. If you look at Rajasthan surface painting, and you look at the Orthodox Church, and you go to Greece. Recently, I was in Greece and went on one of the islands into one of the old churches, again, beautifully embellished. So wherever you look in ancient societies, you had this use of gold. Next. Next. You can see the crown there. And these are some icons. I've got 2 icons to show you. Again, very carefully worked in gold. Next. You see, ancient shapes and forms. We can just go back to that icon, please. Ancient shapes, forms, linked societies and cultures. Trade routes linked it. I asked my aunt, Ramila Thapar, last evening, I said, why gold? Why not some other metal? And she said, actually, we haven't come to any conclusions as historians. But she did say that in ancient India, when there was a sacrifice, they always made an image of a very small image of a god or a goddess, and they put it in to the pit where the sacrifice was happening. For shubh, it was shubh to do that. When a baby is born, a little touch of gold. It doesn't have to be heavy, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it has to be, it's that pure metal, the malleable, pure metal. So even the very poor will have one little something of gold. It may be a dot on that tooth. As you see in many of the Rabari tribals, you'll see a little dot of gold on the front tooth. This is just an observation. I'm not a historian. I have to keep reiterating that. This is what I saw as I explored and traveled. Next.
Then, with that, suddenly, gold entered my wardrobe. I ordered this sari from Kalakshetra in what was then pure zari, which is silver plated zari. And this was one sari that I thought was really heavy because all those lines have become checks and they're all gold. And I thought, God, when will I wear this once in my lifetime? But I've worn it endlessly. Next. Here's a Banarsi. So I started buying Banarsi saris, thinking when I was married at 22, I said to my mother-in-law, I'll never wear this. And now I regret it because the saris that were made then are not being necessarily woven now. And it's wonderful that Swati and Sunaina have started this whole revival. But for people like me who should have bought it then, we would have got it much cheaper. Next. Here's a beautiful paitani, which I bought, not in exactly this color. It's cotton. Paitanis were always cotton. And the borders and palla were in silk and zari. Paitanis were not silk in the body. It's just easier to weave silk, so it's become a silk sari, but actually it was a cotton sari. Next. And here's a paitani. And I have a very funny story about this. You can go to the next picture. This sari was some bright multicolored thing with all these peacocks and birds prancing around. And I said, you know what? I can never wear this. So I dyed it black. This is the result. The zari just leapt off the black, and it's one of my favorite saris. And the funny story about this is I wore it once in Missouri, and I walked into a dinner where Mapu was, and he said, oh my God, where did you get that sari? Must be really old. I said, don't be silly. It's brand new. I just dyed it. Next. This is again a beautiful sari. Look at the way the gold has been used in the arches. Next. Yeah, paitani again. And then I went to Greece on a holiday. Actually, it wasn't a holiday. I had gone to Italy on some work. And the former ambassador of Greece to India said, if you're in Rome, why don't you just fly over to Athens and spend 2 or 3 days with us? So I said, fine. And flew to Athens and was very privileged to meet the great jewelry designer, gold jewelry designer, Elias Lalauni, who spent the whole day with him. And I want to show you some of the images. Next. He worked with form and shape. He just created shapes. There was no embellishment, no additions, no riveting. And he just did these great forms. So he took a very elaborate form. If you go to the next one. And the next. This is a ring, which the design of which comes from dolphins. That's the dolphin head. So he took the head and he just shaped it to look like a dolphin, 2 heads of dolphin, beat it up. And I fell in love with this there. And those days we had no money. It was the first piece of jewelry I've ever bought, was this ring from Lalauni. And when I bought it and gave him the check, traveler's check, in those days we had to carry those, he turned to me and he said, ah, madame, you bought my classic. So that has now been inherited by my daughter-in-law. Next. Then temple jewelry. Lalauni always said to me that day, he said, I said, why don't you come and do a whole collection in India, in South India? He said, the trouble with Indian jewelry is doesn't fit what I like to do. He said, too elaborate, too much riveting, too much embossing. It's not just pure raw form and shape. So this was what he was referring to, which we find absolutely lovely. I mean, I love jewelry like this from the South. Next. This is temple jewelry that is the deities are adorned with. Next. And then Rajasthan, back to Rajasthan. In those days, I was making documentary films with my husband and my brother, and we went to Rajasthan all the time. And I was intrigued by the men. Just look at this gorgeous fellow, and he's got these lovely earrings in his ears. And the next. Look at those. They're beautiful. And they wear them. They
night and day. They don't remove them. The women are wearing silver and the men are wearing gold. Ah, patriarchal power. Next. Look at that. Next. Balis. Next. And I started buying little bits and bobs of gold from then on. I'd ask the Rabadi, I'd say, may I buy a earring like you're wearing? And he'd say to me, women don't wear that. I said, but I want to wear that. I don't live in Javai. I live in Delhi. Nobody will be any the wiser, and I love your earrings. So I started buying. So this is a piece of jewelry from the south. Next. Tribal. This links with all the old Bactrian jewelry. There are shapes and forms and patterns that are very similar, and they carry on in our tradition. Next. Simple, stunning. Next. Again, very popular now, but in the early days when we were traversing around in Rajasthan, you rarely were able to find this kind of jewelry in any of the shops. Next. Again, Kerala, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. This and the Bactrian necklace you saw, there's a similarity there. Next. And here's a great sari, Kurg, and a Kurg wedding sari. This is a friend's grandmother. Next. And wedding jewelry from Kerala. Next. I think it's from Kerala. This is Kerala, definitely. Next. 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 Let's go back one, sorry. Stones. I think the entry of stones, precious stones into gold settings came with the British and the colonial thing. And our traditional jewelry did not have precious stones. It had colored stones, just to add a little bit of zing to the silver. Or to the gold. The Bactrian gold had lapis, turquoise, and coral. Those were the primary stones that were used in the old days. Now we are getting into cut stones and all of that. So I just put this in as an example of that transformation. Next. I find I'm not even looking at my notes now. This is Varak. Amazing. Beaten gold. Today we see a lot of varak, which is beaten silver, because gold is just very expensive. But varak, this is gold varak. Over food, you put it over palaus, you put it on sweets. Next. And you stamped it on fabric. So here is a fragment or a piece of canopy of a tent with gold varak stamped on it. Next. Saris with gold varak. Next. And a jama with a gold varak. Muslin. Now this is put on muslin. Very difficult to stamp varak on muslin. An experiment was done by Rohit Bal recently meaning a few years ago. And life has changed, I said to someone, how do you wash that after you've worn it 2 or 3 times? And they said, you can't. You can't wash that because you'll destroy it. Can you iron it? Well, with difficulty. So that is a craft that will disappear very soon. Next. Now, interestingly, this is badla, what we call mukesh and badla. This is done on net in Egypt and in that area. And it came to India from then. I remember my grandmother having dupattas made like this. These are long strips of badla that are elongated, as you can see. And this, again, we don't find it here, but it was done here. It went overseas and it came back from there and we don't see it. This needs a revival, I think, because it's really quite dramatic and beautiful. And you can do it in gold and silver and a mixture of both and create a new Ganga Jamuna form of embellishment. Next. Okay, so now we are at Chaw Mahalla in Hyderabad. Again, restored by Martin Singh. And It was an amazing experience. He restored this huge room at Chaw Mahalla. And I remember he took me in there and said, open the door, and it was pitch dark. And he put on one switch and all the chandeliers came on. And that drama of those embellished walls and the light and the chandeliers and the glass was just memorable. Next. Again, this is, you can see the work on the walls, on the arches, the jarokas. In India, as in the old civilizations of Greece and Russian Orthodoxy, we embellished the walls of royal homes and palaces, always embellished them in gold and precious stones, studding a lot of the spaces with precious stones, with glass, the Sheesh Mahal concept. Next. Here, Jaipur. Next. And this is Baroda. So just to give you a sense of how we embellished our living spaces. Next. Buddhist monasteries, always embellished, always painted. Painted in color and in gold. The life of the Buddha, the life of some bodhisattvas, storytelling on the walls of monasteries. In Bhutan, there's a place that was recently made. When I say recently, it was made at the end of the last century, called Dochula, painted. Today, stunning. The story of how the army of Bhutan threw out the rebel Bodos who'd entered their their land. And the tradition carries on. That's what's great about embellishing walls. Next. And here the deity is embellished, as you can see. I'd like to say here that embellishing of walls really made an impact on me. There were different types of embellishment. So in the palaces, it was all this gold and very ornate and Sheesh Mahals. And you cut to a place in Rajasthan, where Shekhawati, where the outer walls were painted with contemporary secular imagery. So there are trucks, there are aeroplanes, there are rajas, there are thakurs, there are horses, there are elephants. It's just completely vernacular, present day. It is like, I don't want to equate it with, it's like an illustrated book on the walls. Let me put it like that. And you can date it. I mean, the first plane that came, by looking at the way they've painted the plane, you know when it was painted. Next. Another date. You can see the gold, how beautifully it's burnished on the face. Next. And then we go to Nathdwara, and they're on cloth, gold leaf work, beautifully done, very intricate. They continue to do it today. It's nothing that was done and is locked away in some bhandar and not being done today. The art, craft, tradition continues, thankfully. Next. Here's another image of the gold work that is done in Nathdwara. The cypress tree and two maidens. Next. This is absolutely stunning. I mean, just the use of the gray and the gold and the burnishing of it, and that slightly different shade of gold on the dhoti of the man, the image of the human image there. Next. Here again, it's a stunning piece. Srinathji. Next. Miniature. Mughal miniatures. They used a lot of interesting color combinations. I mean, who would use a lilac and that green in doing a sari, but it would make a superb sari, and that little bit of sand. They knew how to play with color palettes, the Mughals. And then they made those colors leap off with gold all around them. Next. Look at that. I mean, look at that orange in contrast with the gold and that beautiful blue. and then a little bit of the orange on the ground. So it picks up, the vermilion on the ground. So it picks up the orange. Next. A sketch and that beautiful pale blue and gold. Next. Very elaborate. This is very elaborate with the gold as background. So these can stand out. So as a contrast. Next. Badshah Nama. And here we come to Rashtrapati Bhavan. Rashtrapati Bhavan, Ashoka Hall. This is the Ashoka Hall. It's very interesting because when Lutyens, I've done a book on this, which is why it's a favorite subject of mine. Edwin Lutyens is a character who many people, and I know one of the people listening to this disagrees with me fundamentally, but he tried to bring in Indian element into his construction of Rashtrapati Bhavan. He brought in chajjas, he brought in open spaces inside the walls, like our courtyards. He brought in water bodies. He brought in a lot of stuff and pattern that was very indigenous to India. He linked the two. So you had that very colonial mixture, khichdi, and you had a lot of Indian stuff. And it all came together in a rather charming building. There are vaulted corridors. Unfortunately, we don't have a picture of that. Vaulted corridors in Rashtrapati Bhavan where gold leaf work is painted. There are verses from the Quran, verses from the Gita. All kinds of religious faiths are represented through verse, hand painted on the ceilings, in corridors, and in some of the rooms in Rashtrapati Bhavan. In this particular one, the ceiling has Iranian. The Iranian emperor sent the English emperor a painting, which at that point he couldn't use, and Rashtrapati Bhavan was being built. Viceroy's house was being built, so it was sent to India and it was put there. And the side walls, to make it sort of all look a bit cohesive, were then painted by Indian painters that Edwin Lutyens commissioned to do it. So it looks like one piece, but in fact, it is two pieces having a conversation with each other, Persia and India. Next. Manuscripts. Beautiful. Look at that with gold. It was not only in the Quran or Persian manuscripts. I have a Granth Sahib where a lot of gold leaf is used. There are paintings in it interspersed with the pages of written text. So manuscripts used a lot of gold. And, through this journey, as I carried on getting older and older, I discovered that everywhere you look, there's some element of gold. Next. Books. A cover of a book. Next. All these bindings. Look how beautiful these books are. You want to hold these books and really take them in, and you don't want to lose them. They become part of your life, and they're all embellished. Next. Japan. Again, I'm jumping. You have broken ceramics, and in Japan, they'd mend their ceramics. Island culture, you preserve everything, you respect everything that has been made. Difficult times, you live through difficult times, so you conserve. And their conservation is this. The pottery breaks, they take a sap of a tree, they glue it together, and they coat it with gold dust. And that's how they repair their pottery. Next. Look at that beautiful piece. Each piece is different when you repair it. Right? Gold became an adhesive there. No, go back, please. Sorry. Then I went to Jodhpur. I went to Kashmir first. And I was at the palace, and the table was laid, and the glasses were all rimmed with gold. So you had crystal glasses rimmed with gold. Now, this is very normal for most people now. You can get them. They're all, imitative. But these were the real old stuff that had come from, God knows, 2 generations. And they were stunning. So from there, Jodhpur, you had wonderful crockery with beautiful gold work on them, all coming down 3 generations at least. So everywhere you look, there was gold. And then today, when I was thinking about this, I said, you look at mojeries, there's gold thread. You look at a bag, there's gold thread. Everywhere you look, there is an element of gold that enters because it signifies beauty, power, prestige, privilege, all the things humans aspire to. Next. And talking about privilege and aspiration and all of that, we have here Ranjit Singh's throne, gold throne, rulership, most malleable of metals. So you adjust. It is symbolic of adjusting as a ruler to your people. You have that. Next. Coins. They tell history. Next. Gupta coin. Pure gold. They're stunning. In fact, I'm wearing one which I inherited from my grandfather. Next. Chinese coin. Next. A crown. Gold. That's not brass, it's gold. Next. Next. Just showing you some images of tiaras and crowns. Next. Weapons. Why? All our weapons in India are embellished. The sword always has a little bit of gold. The muzzle loaders had gold, and the initials of the person who made it was embedded in gold. So loaders had a barrel that could be bidri, which is silver in gunmetal, and then there was gold embellishment. Next. There you see the dagger with that little bit of gold in it. Next. Next. Isn't that beautiful? Next. Next. Because you'll see this, where this was from. We're just showing you a few. And then next. This was part of Tipu Sultan's throne. This head. Next. And now, today, for me, brass is the new gold. And this ring is made in brass. I had it done last week. And I'm going to show you one more. Next. That is brass with enamel work done in Jaipur today. So people can't afford gold, but the burnished patina, that sense of beauty that gold has, it has a lovely quality about it. It muted, not the chatak type that's polished with chemicals, not that. This. Brass comes the closest, in my definition, to gold. Next. The brass pot. What would we do without it? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mala. That was lovely to go on this journey with you. You've traveled and you're so eloquent, and you brought all these images alive for us. It was really lovely. Now, the last few years, you've worked on these fabulous projects in Rajasthan. Okay, so you've done things that people only dream about doing. Mala has brought all these fabulous museums alive, and she was the cultural advisor for Rajasthan, so she has done a lot. So just for the audience who don't know, so Mala, tell us, the last lecture we had was on the Mehrangarh Fort collection and some of the gold embellished objects that were there. But Rajasthan has so much. Tell us some of your most favorite places in Rajasthan that again brought this gold alive for you.
Yeah, well, I have to tell you that, Rajasthan, when you say most favorite, all of it is like that. You go to the city palace, it's beautiful. It has wonderful work on it. You go to Bharatpur, stunning stuff. Beautiful embellishment. You go to Havelis, and I talked about it earlier, but it was interesting as advisor to the chief minister, and she was an amazing woman because she just backed the idea. And her only mandate, as I said earlier, was please don't bring your age group to the table. Bring 40-year-olds. Let's pass the baton and let's empower a new generation to go out and run with their passions. So one of the first things we did was we took the idea of surface embellishment, surface painting, surface decoration, and decided, why only for palaces? Why not for the Aam Janta? So we took on a project of painting the walls of 10 railway stations across Rajasthan. It was a very interesting exercise because everyone said, how are you going to do this? So we found local painters, traditional painters, karigars, and we said, listen, you go paint it like you think you would like to express your state. So let me tell you about Ajmer. Ajmer was the most elaborate, and it was embellished with gold. There were ceilings with gold. It was absolutely beautiful. It looked like the inside of a palace. And I think people, the pride it generated amongst ordinary Rajput, Rajasthani, tribal people living in Rajasthan, they all came together in that pride. There was no division in that pride. And the railway station became the epitome of that collective, that unity. So I'll give you one more example. I want to bore you all. Bikaner railway station. Bikaner has Badal Mahal in its palace, and there are lots of little clouds, beautiful in blue and gold. So I got the guy there said to me, kya karun? I said, wo Badal Mahal ko recreate kar dijiye aap. So he recreated Badal Mahal in the railway station of Bikaner. It was so beautiful that the collector put a rope around it and made it like a little museum when you arrived there. So I said, this is not what it's meant to be. Please open it up and let people go, touch, feel, and redo it next year. That guy will keep painting. His skill will carry on. So, that's the kind of thing we did. And we redid about 18 state museums. Gave it to all young people to redo, reconceive, reinvent, and bring it into the new age, technological age.
How fabulous. Do the railway stations still look the same?
Actually, I haven't been for 2 years, but from all reports, yes. Yes.
Great.
When regimes change, again, there's a problem there. You see, the regime has to then say, because railways is central government, it has to say, and then there's state government, because it's center and state, they have to say, listen, this has to be renewed. Go rework it. Go give it renovate it. Give it a lease of life. You have to keep giving that money. And that money came from the collector's fund. I didn't get any money from the central government or the state government. Everything was done on CSR in Rajasthan and with government funds of the local government, the panchayat, the collector's office. It was done like that, which is why it became a people's thing. It was not just for those who want to come and take pictures and go back and say, beautiful, look lovely. It became a people's project right across the board. So the museums look like anything in Greece. I mean, I can't believe it. Sikar, Pali, you go into the museum and you transport it into an international ethos of how you should maintain and keep museums.
How fantastic. I think we all have to take a page out of this for the rest of India, I think.
I think every state should do this.
Yeah, the patronage becomes so important. You need a little bit of a push.
And it has to be done by local people. It cannot be done by the state. Because the moment the state does it, it takes ownership of it. If you do it with CSR funds, then people take ownership of it. If you do it with donations, I mean, why can't people in a small town all put in whatever they can and you use that to paint the walls of the station? It can be done.
Correct, absolutely. So coming back to people and coming back to today, Mala, you've been a publisher. You've done the India magazine, you've done Inside Outside when it began first. I mean, you were a visionary in starting all these magazines. And when you come to today and you look at gold as an embellishment for today's world and in the contemporary world, what have you to say for that?
Well, Sharan, it's an interesting question because I think gold for contemporary art installations has been replaced by metal, iron, and brass. I mean, look, let's take Subodh Gupta. He's using metal, steel. Beautiful. He's managed to do it very, very effectively in an Indian idiom. I mean, that tree is is an Indian idiom. It's the tree of life done in metal in a contemporary space. So it's very interesting, but people are playing with different metals, with wood, with macrame, with rope, with other. Gold doesn't fit in, it's too expensive. So gold, I think, has now shifted to textiles only, jewelry for weddings, because otherwise the jewelry is also now getting so over the top that you're buying stuff that is silver plated, silver gold plated, which is fine. So you're beginning to see a change because of economic reasons. The price of gold is just prohibitive. And it is used, therefore, for special things. Wedding, births, textiles. Even in textiles, you don't get asli gold zari.
Yes.
You do get it. But I mean, the point is that goes into another range. How many people can afford it?
Absolutely.
So I think in many ways, it's become a patronage thing. It's gone back to that, of being just the very wealthy. And since there's no rulership and thrones and crowns anymore, you will find it in wedding jewelry and you'll find it in textiles. And of course, you'll get gold work coming in your religious hangings. In Pichwais will have it. The Buddhist tankas will have a little bit of gold. So it is there, but it's there in the traditional genre. It's not there so much in the contemporary genre as I can see.
Yes, and I think a few of the artists who are working in miniature paintings, the contemporary miniatures, of course, have it. And
Yes.
of course, we've seen what Salima Hashmi has done with
That's
all
right.
of the Pakistani artists
Yeah.
who brought it in
Beautiful.
a beautiful way. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I know it's.
But like Neelima
yes,
Dhanda didn't use it, for instance, in her rendering of contemporary art in miniature form.
Yes.
Right. So it's not as prevalent as it was when it was cheap. And when I got married, 1 tola of gold was 200 rupees.
Absolutely, yes. So today we're in another realm. So do we have any more questions? Let me look at the questions we have here. I need my glasses. So we have people thanking you. We have people who've loved it. And we have somebody who says the bangle shown with the after the Coog sari is called a Jodi Kada.
Okay.
And the double is called a Kadaga. And the Kerala necklace is called a Putali, I think.
That's right.
Okay.
We took a conscious decision that we wouldn't caption every single picture. So that would happen.
Yes.
We should and I think do it.
Mayank, do we have any more questions?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I think it's been such a riveting presentation. I think Namrata Zakaria joining us from Bombay. She's a fashion journalist and columnist. Says, Malvika, lovely to listen to you. Can you tell us about the influence on gold souks in contemporary jewelry? Just your opinion.
I just think they're wonderful. I really do. I think the gold souks are wonderful when they were souks. Today, they are commercialized and they need to do that. I have no problem with anything that's commercialized because they have to make ends meet and they have to carry on the tradition. So I have no problem with gold souks at all. I think they're fun to wander through. You may not find something that's really spectacular. When you go through a gold souk and you arrive at an old shop where the old silver is, you find very many more exciting shapes and forms. My experience only, which is limited.
Okay, great. We have 2 more comments and then we have 2 questions. One is again from Gemma de Alessandro. Where can we find pictures of the railway stations repainted, Mala? Google?
No, I doubt it. Yeah, I have that presentation which I can hand to you, all of you, and then you can do whatever with it. I don't think it's out in the public domain because the railway stations are there for everyone to see. So, here I want to say another thing. I think some of these things last also because they become organic, and they're not photographed and put away somewhere. They keep changing, they're evolving. So I, in fact, did not put any of the stuff out there, documented, because I wanted it to just keep evolving. 2 years from now, you might have a young collector who wants to put something else on the walls. It doesn't have to be the same old thing repeated. It was just a start of a process that I hoped would just add value to the entrance of a town and city, and would, in fact, make the station a cultural center. That was my ultimate dream, that you came into this beautiful painted space, you stepped out, and there was a little old van, one of those broken down cargo vans of the trains sitting out there, which has been transformed into a bookshop of local language literature there. Something selling the local art of that area, pots, mojeries, and make it a cultural center, and every evening have the local musicians play there. So when people are coming and going from work using the railway station, there's a lot of activity there. It becomes the hub of the town and the city. Those are the kinds of things. So I'm sorry, I don't have pictures because I wanted it to be an ongoing thing, and I have an aversion to too much documentation. Wrong thing.
We have a similar question by from two people, Karan Rai and Mehrina Imam. For someone who owns no gold, how does one start to curate a small collection of gold jewelry, or how would you advise one approaches the ethos of collecting gold to begin with?
So in India, I would start by saying that, look, every year I will buy a small something made in gold. So I would start with a earring. Nothing elaborate. The Rajasthan Bali that the men wear is the most classic, stunning design. It hugs the bottom of your ear. It is beautiful. And in today's day, you can wear one. You can wear one earring. You don't have to wear another one. You can wear a stud in the other ear. So if the earring is too expensive, you buy one and buy a little gold stud for the other ear. Yes, you must wear something in both ears, because I think that's the balance of the year. But that's a separate question. I'm saying start there. Start in rural India. You know how I started collecting my silver? Because I didn't have the money for the gold. I used to, whenever I arrived in a new place, the first place I go to is the market. Why? Because the market actually tells you the stories of that little town that is different from the next town. You go to the Sunar ki dukan, you sit down on that gadda there, and everyone comes and looks at you because you look like some alien from outer space. And then you start buying, and you buy something. You buy a toe ring, you buy a silver ring, you buy a nut, even if you're not going to wear it. Then you go to the cloth shop. I'm giving you my trajectory. And I buy some cloth. I'll buy a chint. I'll buy the terraline, or what we call terraline, man-made fiber chint. Why do they wear it? Because it's easy to wash and wear. And I'd buy that, and then I'll buy the local chint. It's become a joke now in some of the little towns of Rajasthan that wo Malaji aa rahi hain, wo puchenge wo suti ka chint kahan hai. Nobody asks for the suti ka chint anymore. And then where do I find it? In Himachal Pradesh, coming down, there was a roadblock, and there was a little shop, and I found it there, 2 rolls of it, so I bought them. Now, you must explore. So when you want to buy gold jewelry and you're traveling outside Rajasthan and you're driving from, let's say, Jaipur to Jodhpur. And here again, I want to say, drive. Forget this aeroplane nonsense. When you drive, you're linking with the country. You're looking left and right. You're observing. You're seeing what people are wearing. You're seeing the change. It is the best textbook, a spotted information of one kind. But you must for yourself observe. So drive. First lesson, start to drive. Even on a motorcycle, take a motorcycle and drive from Jaipur if you're young, and Maharina is, she can go to Jodhpur. Then rummage around in the old market. Don't go to the little boutiques. First go there and say, kya hai purana? Buy a lota. I'll tell you a story. I bought a beautiful brass lota once in Aurangabad. We were at the traffic light. There was a man with a beautiful shaped lota, just round. There was no neck to it. And burnished. And I just opened the taxi window and I said, ye kya hai? He said, lota hai. I said, bechoge? He said, haan. Kitne ka? He said, 25 rupees. I said, ye lo 30 rupees aur diyo mujhe. I've never found that shape again. In those days, for 30 rupees, he would have gone and bought a bigger one. I'm talking of the year dot. But I'm just saying, Madras, we'd go to the bazaar where they melt down everything. And I bought beautiful stuff there. Diyas and all of that. So, travel, bazaar, local bazaar. Sit in the shops, chat with the people. When they see you and they see you're serious, they'll bring something. They'll say, "Iska ye toota hai, ye main theek karke ye kharid lo." So earrings is the in gold to start with. And that's enough. You have a earring, then you have a ring, then you move to the bangle. And you don't need anything around your neck, because if you wear gold necklaces, it's like my grandfather always said, don't wear gold necklaces or any necklaces, he used to say to me, because you look like a cow with bells around your neck. But that is just a different way of looking at it. And I'm just saying earrings, they symbolize, I think, femininity. They symbolize design also. So when men wear it, that doesn't mean that they're not men. It's designed for them. For us, it's a little dingle dangle that looks nice on our ears. And for them, it's assertion of power. Gold, sona pehna hai kaan mein. You know? So it's a unisex thing. And I think earrings are very, very interesting to buy if you're starting a gold collection. And you'll get them quite reasonably by weight. You'll still get them by weight if you go into small towns and villages.
Thank you, Mala. We have another question. Any particular gold craft work that you think has disappeared and you would like to see revived?
In India?
Yes.
Well, I think that the beating of gold, which is hollow, you know, how do I put it? A hollow kara, but beautifully beaten. Like that Lalauni ring of mine is not solid. It's hollow, but it's beaten beautifully. We don't know how to beat gold well here. And I think that's something we've lost.
Okay. We have another question from Namrata Zakaria. I recently learned about the Devendra Brahmins of Goa while researching for Wendell Roderick's Goa Museum book. They were among the biggest teachers of filigree in Europe. The Portuguese during the Inquisition were afraid of them because they were so rich and powerful. Would you know anything about them?
No, and this is very interesting. I know nothing about them. Must try and find out. That's what you see, this is what's very interesting, that when you're researching all this and you find all this new stuff, then, you know, it would be really nice to hear about filigree sometime, because Orissa does great filigree, but as far as I know, does it in silver. I'm not sure. So, you know, those linkages would be very interesting. I have no idea about it. Sorry.
Another question, Natasha D'Souza asks, hello, Malvika ma'am. It was an extremely enriching experience to listen to you speak. Can you tell us something about the use of gold in Islamic textiles like the kiswa, even though gold is prohibited in Islam?
That's right, because you don't see it very much in the mosques and all, you don't find it. I know nothing really about that. Again, I have to say, I'm very sorry. I only see it used as it is used, and I don't see it anywhere else. You see a little bit of Salma Sultana on clothes, but that's about it. Woven textures, you know, you don't see it. You see it in manuscripts. Persian manuscripts, they use a lot of gold. The Quran are they written in gold? The covers are in gold. I saw had a little Quran with the cover was all embellished with gold. So yes, don't know. Sorry. As I said right in the beginning, I'm not a scholar and I don't know. I'm still learning.
Thank you, Mala. With that, I'm going to, there are many comments, so viewers could look at the question and answer box for the various comments. Just to respond to the Goa question, I think Seema Bhalla mentions Goa has had the tradition of gold filigree jewelry with malachite. And with that, I hand it over to Sharan, Apparao, and Raghu.
Malachite, that's very interesting.
I hand it over to Sharan and Raghu again. Please take over. Yeah.
Thank you, Mala. That was lovely. Thank you, Mayank. Thank you, Swati and Sunaina. It was lovely to have you, Mala, with us. And we'd love to hear more of this. The trip to Russia was just fabulous. I mean, I wish we could have gone with you. And I remember having a conversation with you on an earlier occasion. We talked about the diamonds in the collection.
Oh, yes, that was the most amazing experience.
Yeah. We need to go back again. We have to hear more about you and your travels. So we'll bring you back again in some form.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me, really.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to Raghu.
Yeah, thank you, Malvika. Thank you, Sharan. Malvika, it was a glittering journey, and we all felt like we were sitting in the same room with you in the center. Uh, Thank you so much for this fascinating lecture, and thank you, audiences, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.